Super. Okay, so you can see both videos, you can hear me. If at any moment anything goes wrong, please let me know in the chat. I'm monitoring it here. So let's start from the new features of InfraNodus. So what I wanted to demonstrate to you today is how you can do sentiment analysis using the Twitter app in InfraNodus. For those of you who already use InfraNodus, you know that it's a text network visualization and analysis app, but I'm going to explain some of the features as we go along for those who are seeing it today for the first time or for the new users. Also, I want to let you know that we are recording this webinar, so it's going to be available online later in a few days, and I'm going to send you all a link in the chat where you can see it. So first of all, when you want to do sentiment analysis, you log in, and then you go into apps. We have it here. And you have this Twitter sentiment analysis app. So you click on this app, and it proposes you to search for a certain topic. So here I'm going to type in coronavirus because it's a hot topic these days. Click go. And what happens now is that it automatically imports all the most popular tweets for this topic, coronavirus. And every node is a word. It represents the words. And every co-occurrence of words in the same tweet is the connection. So you can see a graph that shows how the nodes are connected, what are the most influential ones, and what are the topics that emerge inside. So for example, here on this graph, we can see that Trump is quite a frequently mentioned node. Actually, in any discourse, whatever you analyze, you will see that he manages to get into every news, every information possible. You also have other influential nodes here in the analytics panel. Trump, test, so this is about tests for coronavirus. Case, it's the number of cases, everyone is talking about that. And president, that also relates to Trump. We can actually see it here. If we click here and here, president and Trump, and maybe also travel, let's see. If we click on these nodes, we automatically filter the tweet which mentions all these nodes together in the same context. You can also click here to cancel that. So this allows us to see what are the main topics when we talk about coronavirus. We also see the main topics that emerge. So for example, one of them is the Trump president Wuhan. So let's see, what is this about? So it's something about travel restrictions, people talking about China, Wuhan travel restrictions, and why it was not done in America. So we have this topic. Then another one is the topic of ventilators. So some kind of like concern about the technical needs of the hospitals. People are also talking about protecting from the virus. So we can see here what they're talking about, protecting doctors from the virus, actually. This is what they're talking about. By the way, you can also click here and see which context or which tweet we're actually talking about. Okay, you can deselect it here. And then another one is the number of deaths, which is quite a frequently mentioned topic. So this allows you to see what are the main topics that emerge in this discourse, how they're related to one another. A new feature is the emergent topic. So it's here in the right, bottom right panel. What you can see is that people are tending to start talking about doctors, pandemic, and hospitals. Breaking is just breaking news. In fact, when you see something like this, it's not very informative to our discourse. You can just delete it. If you click this node, and then you click the trash can, and it's deleted. This changes a little bit the picture. So we see that people are talking about hospitals, doctors, pandemic, and so on. So these are the emergent topics. It's the topics that started to appear more recently. I'm going to answer one of the questions at this point. Regardless of data volume and tech, do you think InfraNodus will be able to offer a more clustered view of the topics and narration? Right, so some kind of internal mechanism that would sort out these topics and tell you that, for example, This is talking about the political aspect. This is talking about the number of deaths. This is the healthcare aspect. Yes, I mean, right now you can do that yourself as a user and create this interpretation, but definitely it will be great to add a feature that would do that for you. And it's something in the pipeline, and I'm going to integrate it soon. Just need to not overload the interface and keep the network analysis possible. You sent an example from Quid. They usually do that for marketing research. So they're more interested in presenting dashboards that can be used in marketing presentations. The way that this tool works right now, it's catering to the users who want to do this analysis themselves and make interpretations themselves. But definitely, as you said, it can be a very good addition to add these topics. Regarding sentiment analysis, is this overall sentiment or stance towards the topic? That's a question from Sam. Well, in fact, the way InfraNodus works is that it represents every word as a node, and every co-occurrence of words is a connection between the nodes. And then it builds a graph. And then based on the modularity or on the graph community structure, it identifies which nodes belong to the same cluster. So for example, here we see that case, death, pandemic, intelligence belong to the same cluster. It means that they were used in the same context. So this becomes like a topic or a cluster of nodes. And this is how InfraNodus interprets which topics exist in a discourse. So it's based purely on the correlations between the words that are used together. However, having said that, it represents very well the overall sentiment, to answer your question, because it shows you what are the main topics, which are the most prominent ones. So obviously, if people are talking a lot about the cases of deaths, let's say it's going to be very prominent in the graph, just like Trump is, because everyone on Twitter is always mentioning what Trump said, what he's going to do, and so on. So it gives you a pretty good idea of the general sentiment, but instead of telling you that it's positive or negative, because this loses out all the nuances, in fact, it's telling you what are the different, what's the diversity of the topics that exist inside, and how are they related? And then it gives you the possibility to make this interpretation yourself. So this is how it works. Another question from Aminul: can this be modified location-based? And is it possible to add other language as Bangla? You mean Bangladeshi, I guess? And does it support Facebook? Okay, so location-based. In fact, yes, it can be easily modified. I just need to change the code, something I'm going to do very soon, to enable you to search for other languages. In fact, InfraNodus already has support for several languages: English, German, French, Russian, limited support for Portuguese and Spanish. You can find the settings if you go to the settings, language settings. So you have a few here. Swedish also, I forgot to mention. You can also choose that it doesn't detect any language, and then you can work with symbols. Someone was asking me if it's possible to work with emoticons. You could actually do that. If you select do not detect any language, you could just see connections between the different emoticons and interpret sentiment this way. Is it possible to add another language? For sure. It depends on which libraries actually exist. For example, normally for Chinese, it's something that I want to add soon because it exists in Japanese as well. Some languages, it's not so easy to find software for it. So you would have to wait. Or if you want this language to be included, if you send me a library in Node.js, JavaScript, Node.js, that does all the lemmatization and so on, then it's possible to do that. If your language doesn't have too much morphology, just adding the stop words is making it possible to represent it as a network. So in that case, it's much easier. It depends on the language. And does it support Facebook? Aminul, you would have to tell me a little bit more what kind of data you want to export from Facebook, but generally after the Cambridge Analytica scandal, Facebook doesn't allow any access to its data anymore. So the only way to do that would be to scrape it, which we could not include in a commercial product. However, there is the open source version. You could easily download it from GitHub and integrate whatever scraping features you want and represent this data. Then it would be much more easier and also reliable. Do we get a classification of sentiment? Sam Martin is asking. Positive, negative, neutral. Do we need to classify this ourselves? So right now it doesn't give you classification of sentiment. In fact, this was mostly because of my personal decision, because I didn't want to make it too simplified, that you just see things positive, negative. I mean, it's too binary somehow. But I see that there is demand from users, and sometimes it's also useful to include these simple categories into any analysis. So yes, for sure, it's something I'm going to integrate soon using some other libraries. So yes, it's going to be included, this analysis, and it would give you like a score of that. Right now, the score that we have here is the network structure score, and it shows how diversified or how focused the discourse is. And this is quite interesting because, for example, let's say if we get all the words back into the graph, we will see that while the network itself is diversified, which is based on its community structure, the modularity measure is not so high, and there is two main nodes that take all the influence in the network. So in fact, it's quite focused on a particular subject. The way that the subject is explored is quite diverse, but there is a focus on one. So this already gives you some interesting information about the nature of the discourse that you're dealing with. I'm going to answer more questions now. Maybe first from the Q&A section, because I didn't go there yet. Highest local influence. Someone is asking, what does it mean, highest local influence? So basically, the way that influence is calculated in networks, you have a lot of different measures. The one that is used in InfraNodus by default is the measure between the centrality. And this measure, it shows how often a node appears on the shortest path between any two randomly chosen nodes in the network. So a slightly long definition, but basically, if the node tends to appear on whatever shortest random path you choose in the network, it means it's always there in almost any discourse. And also it correlates with the fact that this node will connect different topics together. And this is why it becomes influential. So for example, Trump might not even be the most frequently mentioned term, but if it's something which is mentioned in many different topics, it's going to be shown as highly influential. You can also switch this, by the way, in the settings. If you go here, you can choose that most influential words have, and then you can choose maximum degree, for instance. And then it's just going to show you the nodes which have the most connections as the most influential ones. Another question from Vaslava. What is the metrics of connection between the words? Well, it's the words co-occurrence, actually. So when the words co-occur in the same context, they will be connected. If they're closer to each other, they're strongly connected. Like, for instance, in this case, March. You see the number of cases in March is a thicker connection than case and February, because people are talking about March more than February now. So this shows you the measure of connection. Another question is it possible another connection than co-occurrence? Yes, if you tell me what kind of criteria you would like to use, let me know. I'm going to leave my email here into the main chat and also into the Q&A section. By the way, you can also all see the questions in the chat. Send me what kind of criteria you would like to use for this connection, and we can see how to integrate it. Can you enable import of custom values? For example, list of tweets would contain our own sentiment score next to each. Right, so you would like to somehow import your own data with tweets. Yes, you could make a CSV file, and then you would be able to sort of mark every tweet as if it has certain sentiment, positive, negative, neutral, for instance. and then create 3 different graphs, only the positive, only the negative, only the neutral ones, and then compare these graphs together. To go more in detail on that, it's better if you send me an email and explain what kind of use case you have, because then I would be able to explain to you easily how you could do that with the tools you have in InfraNodus. Another person, so let's see, Cohen is asking, how is emerging topics activated? So the process behind that is that it takes a certain ratio of the last tweets, so I think around 20%, and it looks for the most frequently mentioned words inside, and then it removes all the most influential elements, so they don't sort of overpower the rest of the discourse. And then it shows you what are the emerging topics. So not yet the most influential, but quite prominent in the last 20% of tweets. By the way, this 20% I'm going to add into the settings, so you can also change the spectrum. Maybe you want to take the last 30% and so on. That's easily adjustable. Is it possible to make social network analysis, is asking Fernando. Yes, it's possible. So I will show you how to do that. You can actually go into a more advanced Twitter import section. For instance, let's say I want to search coronavirus, but I want to see who is actually tweeting about that. So here I would have to select that, yeah, I can actually keep it at the most popular tweets. That's fine. Exclude search term, yes. Exclude retweets. So I would say show originating Twitter accounts in the graph and make a graph of Twitter users only. And then I will name it social. Import the last 200 tweets. Let's see what it produces. In the meanwhile, I'm going to read another question. Or actually, it was faster than I expected. So yeah, here you have the analysis. You see that in the selection of the most popular tweets presented by the Twitter API, these are the 2 people that are mentioned the most, Donald Trump and Uriel Candace, another American politician. You also can zoom in and see there is a cluster of interactions here. So you can explore what they're talking about, and so on. So yes, it gives you an idea of who is dominating a certain discourse. By the way, you can also do the same for any Twitter account. So it doesn't have to be coronavirus search term, but you could take Donald Trump's Twitter account and see who he tends to repost the most, or who he's talking about, who he's referring to, and so on. So that would build you a social network of his tweets. Okay, more questions. Are we able to isolate the connections between only hashtags, just like you've shown us with emoticons? Yes, very good question, Sam. It's possible to do that. The way to do that is if you go to the advanced Twitter import, you see have the section here, process only hashtags. So by default, it selects both hashtags and words. If you click here, coronavirus, most popular tweets. By the way, you can also import the most recent ones, or you can have a mix curated by Twitter of the most recent and popular ones. So let's do that, for instance. Don't forget to exclude the search term so it doesn't overwhelm the rest. Exclude retweets is a good option. Don't show originating Twitter accounts because we're not interested in the social network analysis this time. And we don't need a graph of the Twitter users only. We actually want to exclude them from the graph. By the way, you could also uncheck that and then you would see the words and the Twitter users that use them. But for now, let's just keep it simple. Hashtags. So here you see I select process only hashtags. Visualize. And it's going to visualize using only the hashtags. So you see the visualization and analysis of this discourse based only on the hashtags. So what do we have here? We see that COVID is quite a prominent one. This is obvious, so let's select it and delete it so we can see what's hiding behind it. Okay, so mental health is quite an important hashtag now which is very interesting, actually. It's great that people are talking about long-term implications of the virus on mental health, on people being locked down, unemployment. Probably I'm making my own interpretations here, going a little bit too far. Social distancing is another hashtag that is used a lot with coronavirus lockdown. So let's say that we understood what this is about. Let's delete them from the graph. This is a really good feature that I really recommend you to use. Once you analyze something, just get rid of it from the graph. This is what most tools don't allow you to do, you know? They just show you the most obvious stuff, and then you cannot see what's hiding behind. So let's just get rid of the most obvious stuff, and then we see the less obvious things which people are talking about. For example, I don't know what that is, mental health. It's probably some organization, Aikido practice. So someone who is still teaching classes of Aikido on Zoom. So you see there we get to the very interesting parts of this discourse which would be normally hidden behind the main agenda. And that's quite interesting to also just use Twitter in this way, you know, that you don't see what Twitter is pushing you in the front. It's probably going to be something about Donald Trump and the number of deaths, but you actually see how people are coping with it, which can be really interesting. If you want to get these nodes back into the graph, you just click them back. They will all appear again, and you will be able to see them in the graph again. You also have the topic analysis here in the analytics panel. You see exercise fitness is an emerging topic in this case, mental health. So this is one, community mental health, soil, plants. By the way, this is interesting. Someone is promoting how to care for plants. Then you have another one, humor, cartoons. Okay. So you see, you can discover a lot of interesting stuff this way. Let's get to more questions now. Oh, someone is sending their note of thanks. They used the network structure and interconnectedness features to assist with analysis of the 3-year university sustainability plan that crossed faculty and staff. It allowed us to create work groups that will now do the work. Both features were priceless for developing effective cross-constituency system design. Thank you very much, Mary. It's very nice to hear when people manage to use InfraNodus and to reach some results. If you don't mind, I would really love to use this as a testimonial on the website, but let me know if you have something against it. Or let's better make it opt-in, not opt-out. So just send me a note if you're okay with that, because I would be really happy to link to your university or to your company and just put this testimonials so others can see how to use InfraNodus for their use cases. Okay. Another question from Samuel Collins, is the hashtag Twitter user network represented as a Bimodal network? Well, you can make it such, so you could make a network that combines both hashtags and Twitter users, but the way to do that would be to actually superimpose them on each other. So for example, it's actually a good question. I'm going to demonstrate how you can compare different graphs together. So you have this one graph, which is a graph of the hashtags. And then we had another graph, which was the graph of users. Now they're separate. So if we want to see how they're connected, we can just click on this button here, which shows us intersections or differences between the two. So let's click actually on the differences. And then you click on the graph in the menu that you want to compare it with. In this case, it's the social graph. Okay. So as they're very different, there is no, yeah, it shows intersections now. So sorry, I'm just going to go back and show the differences. Like this, we can represent them as a bimodal network. Okay, so here on one side you have the hashtags, and on another side you have the users. And you have two networks. In fact, what would be interesting here is to import separately a graph of hashtags, but with users, originating users, and then compare it with the social network. But you have a lot of different options. Just play around with the import of Twitter and see how it works. just wait until tomorrow to do that because I'm going to upload all the updates, so it's going to work much better and faster. Good to know concepts in local and global contexts. Stella, I think I would need you to clarify this. Thank you, Mary, opting in. Plymouth State University, great, thanks a lot. Does the Twitter module give you a snapshot of the data around the topic last 7 days? Or does it continue to collect data once you have saved your graph? So, very good question, Sam. You're asking the most questions today, it's great. And they're very interesting, thank you. So you're kind of making me review all the new features step by step. Here you have this new live feature. I'm going to make it available to the people who want to try it, not yet to all the users. In fact, it's going to be reserved for the enterprise users only. But if you want to try it, I can make it available for you. So you can test it out and give me some feedback on how it works. Actually, it's a feature I'm really excited about. I worked on it for the last 3 weeks. What it allows you to do is to do exactly that, Sam. What you're saying is that you have a snapshot of this topic, and then let's say that you want to update it with the new snapshot every day. Obviously, it's going to change every day. So what it allows you to do is to launch a regular update to make this graph live. And here you can choose the settings. So for example, I say that I want the last 200 tweets, most popular ones. I can also choose most recent ones, or popular and mixed, for example, for this query. I can even change the query. And let's say, so usually I would recommend you to do every day for the most popular ones, so you don't overload the server. But for this demonstration, I'm going to choose every minute. And you have 3 options here. You can overwrite, so it just overwrites the new data on top of the old ones. Append is going to add to the graph. This I would not recommend to use for so many tweets because your graph will become unreadable very quickly. It's going to have a lot of nodes. But in fact, it's also possible to do that because what it does is that it analyzes what are the new tweets, and if there is anything new arriving, it's going to add it to the graph. And then you have clone, and this is great because it creates another graph with the update. So basically, you could set something up like that for coronavirus to do every day. You make one clone, or every hour, and then it would save you 24 different graphs in a matter of a day. So you can trace the evolution of a discourse, which can be super interesting if you do research or if you want to analyze how the discourse changed over a few days. By the way, you can do this not only for the Twitter, but also for Google and the RSS news feeds. So you can trace news, social discourse, or Google. Here I can choose every minute, and let's say I'm going to append. Activate. What happens here? Yeah, I forgot to enable this feature for myself. So I'm sorry, I'm just going to go into under the hood and activate it so that it works. Locked myself out of the new feature. Okay, just a second. In the meanwhile, don't hesitate to ask more questions. Or also, I would be very interested to hear what kind of use case you had in mind. And let's see if InfraNodus can help you with that. So let's now reload the graph and activate the live update. So popular and mixed. Every minute, append coronavirus. Okay, so live update is now activated. You see it's green and it's blinking live. And every minute it's going to poll Twitter, get the updates, and show them on this graph. You will be able to see that as we continue with the seminar. So yeah, it's a great feature. By the way, what's good is that you can also make this graph public. If you click here, and then you will get like a URL and embed code, which you can then easily embed on your website or refer to on your website. So for instance, let's say you have a page online where you're talking about a certain topic, you could embed the graph and it would update automatically live every minute, every day, every hour. And you would be able to show to your users what's going on around a certain topic on Twitter, on Google, or in the news. Okay, I'm going to answer more questions. So, does the Twitter module give you, yeah, this I answered already from Sam. Okay. Stella is asking, when you do a concept search, the analysis you get gives you an idea of how a concept is categorized in different scenarios. See, by the way, the graph just updated now, automatically, showing you the new picture. So Stella, to answer your question, I don't really understand what you're saying. I'm sorry. Probably it's me. So if you could just rephrase it so I understand better what you mean, because I covered a lot of different topics here and maybe it's just hard for me to understand what exactly you mean. Mary is asking, are there affinity groups forming to share Nodus data? So I'm thinking to make an online community board where you could actually share some data sets you're working with, your results and so on. It would be really great to do that. At the moment, I would really encourage you to post it on Twitter with the hashtag InfraNodus. Like this, we can all see what we're working on and exchange this data. It would be really great to do that. As you see, the graph is updating by itself automatically. Okay, Stella was just rephrasing the comment. Okay, great, thanks. Is this live feature available also in Twitter user networks or only in Word networks? Yes, Jordi. By the way, it was actually Jordi giving the idea to implement this sooner because I had it in the pipeline and then they wanted to work on a project that would require this functionality. So thank you for bringing it to my attention. Yes, it's available for the users right now. I think I didn't really test it with users so well. So if you want to test it out and give me your feedback, we can try that and see how to make it work for you. All right, so how do I switch to the circle view? Right, Florian, so by default, I guess you mean the layout of the graph, and you see it's a circle at the beginning. Well, in fact, it applies Force Atlas layout by default. If you want to have circle layout, send me an email. I'm going to write it again in the chat. Tell me more about your use case, and I will see what would be the best way to integrate this functionality, because this is not a hard one. It's very easy. By default, the graph is aligned as a circle. So it's pretty easy to integrate it. By the way, this is why, you know, if you need a feature, don't hesitate to write me, because some of the features are very easy to implement. Some are very hard, like this live update. But, you know, if you just want a different kind of layout, a different language, it can be a matter of a few hours. So please let me know. Another question, let's see, from Guzin. Which algorithm is used to extract topics? So it's based on the graph algorithm, which detects communities in the graph based on how closely the nodes are connected. So if the nodes tend to appear in the same context, like for instance here on the graph, death, case, and total, they appear in the same context, in the same tweets, or in different tweets, but next to each other. And then it means that these nodes will be connected. They will form a cluster in the graph. And InfraNodus automatically detects that as a cluster and represents it as a topic. Here you have other ones. So for example, live data on COVID, tests of people and so on. You see the pink one. So basically, yeah, this is how it works. Is it possible to connect InfraNodus to LMS in gCanvas? Could you please tell me more about this, Rogers? Like what kind of software it is? You can do it in the chat, and then I'm going to tell you what the options are. But basically, yes, usually it's possible to connect. How do you switch to the circle view? Okay, this we had already. Do you have a tutorial for comparing graphs? Let's see. I think I have it on YouTube, but when you open the apps page, you also have this. Let's see if it exists here. No, not yet in the manual. But if you go on the YouTube page, which is available here, if you click here, you have our YouTube channel, and there is a tutorial for graph comparison, but I'm going to add it soon into the manual as well and explain how it works in more detail. Russell is asking, are the different graph communities, node and link colors, determined by cluster analysis or some other algorithm? So yeah, I answered this question already a few times, but maybe not in so much detail. But basically, yeah, what it does is that it uses community detection algorithm. I cannot recall at the moment which one of them exactly, but I can assure you it's one of the most advanced ones. And it's an iterative algorithm based on how often the nodes co-appear together. So, for example, if the nodes tend to be densely connected, more densely connected together than with the rest of the network, it will be identified as a community. So it's not really a cluster, it's really an iterative algorithm that detects communities. So which nodes are more densely connected between each other than to the rest of the network. And then it measures the modularity score, which is shown here. You see, you have here the modularity score. And if usually in that algorithm, if it's less than 0.4, it means that the network is really interconnected. So any topics you get, they're not so much representative of what are the distinct communities inside the network. If it's more than 0.4, then it's quite representative. So you can use this functionality. And of course, InfraNodus also takes all this into account. By the way, let's deactivate the live update and continue with the questions. And then I'm going to demonstrate how you can do the same for the news feeds and for Google search results, and how you can compare graphs together also I'm going to show. And then, by the way, you could then just watch this webinar after and do this to your own data. Okay, Russell is asking, is there a limit to the number of recent posts we should choose? Do you have any recommendations for this? So yeah, I mean, you would not want to have too many posts, because what happens, you see, there is quite a few of them now. I think, how many are there? Let's see, it's like 1,000 posts. And the network becomes really densely connected, because the more posts we use, the more words there are, the more connections there are. So I would actually rely on the AI algorithm of Twitter that selects for you the most popular posts. If you just want to see what people are talking about at the moment, it's quite reliable algorithm that will make a very representative sample for you of the things that get retweeted, liked, and pushed at the top. And in that case, 200, the default, is quite sufficient. If you want more, it's available on the enterprise plan. The only thing is that if you decide to use that feature, it will be nice to actually talk about your use case, because there might be better ways to access this data. But in general, yeah, I would say 200, 300 is a good amount if you want to use graphs for representation. If you have thousands, the visual representation becomes not so easily readable. However, if you look here, we have 1,000 tweets, and we still detect topics quite precisely, and we still get a good overview of what people are talking about. Please explain exactly what you see on the comparing graph, is asking Cohen. Okay, so maybe it's time to do the comparison feature and to demonstrate the RSS import, because this would be the best use case to also show how this comparison works. So I will import again the latest tweets for coronavirus, the most popular ones, according to Twitter. While this is happening, I'm going to read more questions. For example, yes, Jordi, it's Louvain, but it's some kind of modification of the modularity algorithm, so it's not the most basic implementation. How are emergent topics calculated? Is it based on historical data? So I already mentioned that, but basically it takes 20% of the latest tweets. It looks for the most frequently mentioned terms inside, and then it removes the ones that are already influential in the network, because they will usually overwhelm this data. And once you get rid of that, you see what is emerging. You will be able to also set these parameters yourself in the settings. Javed is asking, is there any way to calculate centrality measures like closeness between this eigenvector centrality and more for each one of the nodes? Okay, good question. So in fact, you already have the degree and the between centrality calculated for each node. I think it's just not yet shown in the analytics pane, and it's something I want to implement. But if you want to play in being hacker a little bit, you can go into this developer JavaScript console. In fact, it can be very interesting because it shows you everything. You see that if you click on the node in the console, you can see that the node Trump has 35 edges, between the centrality belongs to the first community. By the way, I think it also shows all the numbers, all the Louvain modularity numbers, modularity scores, the number of communities total, and so on. So this has quite a few data. If you're interested in data science, you will find it can be interesting for you, but I'm going to integrate it into the analytics panel because it's being calculated already. And Javed is asking another question. If there is a way, is there any way to reorder the graph based on it? So yeah, as I said, you can go to settings and reorder the graph based on the degree, or by default, it's between a centrality. Okay, right now you cannot use other measures to order the graph, but in fact, the thing is that they're all being calculated. So if you just let me know about your use case and why you would like to have these measures added, I can see if I could just add them into the next update, because this is not something hard to do. Just need to see how to implement it into the UI, not to overwhelm users with a lot of different features. So let's get back for a moment to our graph comparison work. We have visualization of the Twitter data here, of the tweets, of the most popular tweets selected by Twitter, which mention coronavirus. Here's the graph. You see the most prominent topics: doctor, ventilators, lives, ACT, virus, protect, Wuhan, and so on. Now let's see how we can compare the discourse on social networks to the news. And by this, I will also demonstrate to you how the graph comparison feature works. So let's import the news. Let's go to the import external data RSS app here. And we select news of the day. That basically means The Guardian, New York Times, Washington Post, and Financial Times. And let's get all the news they have on coronavirus. Let's say we want 30 items from each feed. So overall, it's going to be 120. And yeah, why not? Let's include teasers. I would normally recommend you not to include teasers, so it would just import the headlines. And in fact, perhaps for this case, it's better because we're comparing it with tweets. The thing is that I will actually name it Corona. Some newspapers add very long teasers that are like almost the size of the article. So what you're risking here is to be overwhelmed by only one news source. And this is why selecting headlines only works really well, because here we have only the titles of the articles and we see what they're writing about. So for example, we see that currently these 4 newspapers are writing in relation to coronavirus about the following things: global briefing on Thursday. So what are they talking about? Let's see. Global recession. Right, so it's the briefing about the global recession from the New York Times. Battle for ventilator. The ventilators to battle coronavirus. Okay, this is another one. And the number of cases. Now let's say that we want to compare the news discourse to what people are talking about. You have two options here to compare graphs. You can see the similarities or you can see the differences. If you click on this, it shows you the intersection between the two graphs. So let's say I want to see what is similar both in the news and on Twitter. I select this icon, go here, and then click on my Twitter import. And what's going to happen here is that I will see only the nodes that exist in these both discourses together, both in the news and on Twitter. They will be highlighted. You see, so I see that, for example, in fact, news are not talking so much about Trump, news about coronavirus at this point of time, but they do talk about ventilator, the number of cases, millions of lives, tests, just like the people on Twitter, they also talk about all these subjects. Another feature is that I could go back into the news and I could see what's different. So here it actually explains, if you hover over this icon, it says, see the differences with another graph. So what's not present in this graph, that's present in another one. That means what's not present in the news, that is present on Twitter. So what people are talking about, that's not in the news. It's going to be highlighted blue. You see these nodes here. If you want to see what they are, you could either hover over them. So latest updates, recession. But here you have the insight feature, and it says, so what people are talking about in the news, but not on Twitter. And you see Friday worldwide latest update. So this is quite okay. Of course, this would be there because it's the news, so they will always say latest update. So let's select this, delete that. Worldwide Friday. Okay, this is also not so useful to us. Then let's delete the most popular words so we can kind of peek what's hiding behind this. So these blue nodes is what people are talking about on the news that is not on Twitter. Let's zoom in. Sorry for the little delay with Zoom, it's a bit slow. So recession, global recession. So we have an article on the news that talks about global recession, but people were not talking about it on Twitter. We can also do the same the other way around. So for example, now we click here and we go in the news. What we're gonna see is, let's delete the coronavirus node so it doesn't overtake the rest. So we will see that people talk about this stuff on Twitter that there is not so much news about. It's Trump, president, response to pandemic. So news are not speaking about Trump and his response so much, or the response to the pandemic. They're talking about other things. So this is kind of like the basic workflow you would do to compare the two different graphs together. And you have more data here. For example, it shows you how similar those graphs are. So what is the intersection between them? You can see that in both graphs, they talk about coronavirus, case, test, million. So this is quite a prominent topic. We also see the structural gap. So what are the two different topics that could be connected, but maybe are not so much connected in these both discourses? And you can also see the main topics in both of them. So that can be interesting. Okay, let's go on. Okay, Cohen, I'm glad that you understood how that works, the graph comparison feature. However, an anonymous attendee is saying not quite sure how to interpret the interface. which displays differences between two networks. Can you briefly provide an interpretation? So I kind of just talked about that, but if you have any questions, please write me an email and I'm going to walk you through. If you still don't understand, we can do a really quick Zoom call, 10 minutes. I'm going to explain to you everything and you will see how it works. Is it possible to specify the time range? Is asking Jen. Also, what is the maximum number of posts it can process? So time range for tweets, no. It's possible for news. When you import news, you can specify the time range, but not for the tweets. But with tweets, the thing is that if you import not more than 1,000, it's probably going to be the last hour anyway. So if you have a particular use case in mind where this feature would be important for you, please let me know. Sending my email again into the main chat. Please let me know and tell me more about your use case and we can see how it can be implemented. Sam is saying that the new live feature is fantastic, would like to test it. For example, to monitor weekly hashtag frequently asked question sessions for specific groups. Is this for local versions only or also for the server-based version? So this is only for the server-based version. And usually it would be available to enterprise users. However, Sam, if you would like to test it, please let me know, write me an email, and I'm going to activate it for you. You would not have to pay anything extra for it. I would be really happy to hear your feedback and you know what features you would like to have. By the way, you can, of course, connect it to any RSS feed. So when I talk about the news, you know, you could do this live feature for anything. Let's say you have a message board, just choose custom RSS feed here and choose any feed you want. So you could even use it on your own website or your own blog or anything you want, basically. You can even create your own feed from any data. You know, there's a lot of third-party services that do that. So basically this you could use for anything you want. In fact, and that's why I'm so excited about this feature and really happy to have implemented it, and we'll be really happy if you test it with me together. And once it's tested, we can also see how to implement it into the open source version as well. Benjamin is saying right now we're looking to evaluate new consumer comments, emails, forum questions, search terms, and compare them to pre-corona to help us understand what are the new questions consumers are asking about our brands. So really looking forward for the ability to better understand volume, thousands of questions, so size by co-occurrence. Yeah, in fact, so you can use that on thousands of questions. Right now, I think in the cloud version, you would have to maybe make several imports because it would only take a certain number of topics of tweets or of questions at the same time. But you could just do it a few times over and over again, and that would work. In the enterprise version, there would be the feature to allow you to import thousands of questions and see this data for them. Sam is saying, not sure how easy, but if we could have the option of isometric layout and network splitter 3D layout, that would be great. Okay, this I have to save your question because honestly, I don't know exactly what that means. Maybe I'm too focused on the topic of the conversation now, but I'm going to make a research, see what that is, and if it's something that I could implement, for sure, let's do this. As I say, it's always nice to know what kind of use case you would like to have for that. So if you could let me know, please send me an email. The enterprise plan, is this the same as the patron plan? So the patron plan is the one where you pay €9 now per month. It used to be 5, now it's 9, but all the old users, they pay 5 as before. And the enterprise plan, no, it's a new plan where you can have multiple users and where you can have access to all these extra features like live and so on. And basically, you know, it's not because I'm sort of want to make as much money as possible. It's just because this feature requires much more bandwidth and much more server power. So the only way to make it possible is to charge more. And this is why it's on the enterprise plan only. Rachel is asking, I'm sorry if this has been covered. but is there a way to specify the time range of tweets or Google search imports? Okay, I answered that already. Question answered. Sam, yes. Abdul Aziz is asking, does the tool support Arabic language? Not yet. Tell me more about your use case. I will look into it. I saw that it's very easy to do that with Persian language, but not with Arabic. So I have to check that, what libraries exist, but we can make it happen. Okay, let's go more into the questions again. Online community board would be great. Yes, that's in the works. Is there any way to calculate centrality? Okay, this we had already. Okay, Sam is asking, are you able to pull sample data from Reddit posts or forums? Like I said, as long as something has RSS feed, yeah, you just copy the RSS feed and add it into the RSS import. Comments from threads on YouTube. Great. Yes, totally something I want to implement. Right now, you can actually visualize YouTube videos, so the videos with the titles. Sometimes it stops working because the API of YouTube is a bit undecided, I think, on whether it wants to provide this data or not. But the comments would definitely be very interesting to implement. And it's something I would like to work on, definitely. So right now, what I could recommend is if you find a service that could convert those comments to an RSS feed and then just use the RSS feed in import feature to import those comments. You could also just install some extension in the browser, in Chrome or in Firefox, which takes out the comments from YouTube. I'm sure something like this exists and saves them as a CSV file. And then you just copy and paste the data in InfraNodus and you have the visualization. But of course, it would be nice to do that automatically. So it's something I'm going to work on. Okay. Ronald is saying that comparison of networks is a very useful piece of functionality. Thank you. Please let me know how I can improve it. It's not at its perfect state yet. So I would be very happy to hear from you. Javed is asking, is there any way to merge two semantically same nodes? For example, COVID-19 and coronavirus. Yes, this question has been asked a lot. Right now, no, there is no way to do that. But it's something that I think would be very important to do. So I just need to write it down now, which I just did. And I'm going to think how to make it happen. Interface is in French, Spanish. So no, the interface is only in English, but you have different languages in the settings here, where you can choose Spanish and French. And Jack is saying, excellent webinar. Thank you, Dimitri. Thank you, Jack. I hope you enjoyed it. We are already at 1 hour. Still almost 50 participants, which is great. Thank you for being with me all this time. I hope it was helpful. If you still have any questions, if you would like to share your use case, let me know. By the way, there is also the polling feature in Zoom. So if you click on your Zoom interface, you will see the polling. And if you click on polling, you would be able to vote. I just asked the question, what are the most common data sources you use to analyze sentiment and discourse around a certain subject? So if you could just take a moment and answer this question, it would be great, because it would allow me to know what functionality I should focus on when I'm developing this tool. I will be waiting for your questions a little bit longer. If you still have anything to ask, also if you would like to share your use case with others now or in the next webinars, please let me know. You can write it in the chat. For example, next time when we speak, you would like to share something on your screen, just write in the chat that I would like to share something in the screen, and I'm going to promote you to the panelist. And then you will be able to share the screen and talk about your use case to the others in the end of the webinar. So this is something that we can do. Thank you very much, Russell, for your feedback. Great to hear that you enjoyed the webinar. The question from Ronald is the number of main topics determined by occurrences in the network, or are you displaying top 4? Yeah, I'm only displaying top 4. This is something I already said last time, and probably I'm just going to implement it into this next update that's coming this weekend. In fact, there are many more topical groups. When you go into the JavaScript console here, you can actually see that the total groups is 12. And I think they're all shown here. You see, so if you click on all the different communities in the graph, this is like the backstage of InfraNodus, let's say. If you've never tried this feature in your browser, you should, because it's super interesting. View, developer, JavaScript console. There's a lot of data there when you use InfraNodus. I hope no errors. Usually it's also used to show errors, but here you have all the data, but much more expanded version of it. So for example, here it shows all the different communities in the graph. If you click here, it shows you that there's 12. So you see the first one, and you can see which nodes. And you see not only the first 3 nodes, but all the nodes that belong to this community. So you can see exactly the measure for each node, degree between the centrality, and so on. So for example, if you wanted to see what is the 5th community, which is not shown in the analytics panel here, just click here, and you will see that it's this community that has Wuhan, State, China, and so on. You know, so yeah, right now, unfortunately, you have to go under the hood a little bit, but I'm going to add this here, so you could just click the button and see all the different topical groups. It's actually pretty easy to do, so I hope. So if it's easy, I'm going to implement it very fast. If not, it's going to take a moment. Okay. Let's see. Other questions? Rogers, great tool. Thanks, Dimitri. I have used the tool in my PhD work, but we'll share findings in a later stage. Paper in review round 2. That's great. Please let us know how you used InfraNodus. And by the way, I want to ask you all also if you have a possibility to share on social media your work with InfraNodus, even just the screenshot, which you can get here, PNG, export, just saves the file with the network, or just with some kind of explanation of what you're working on, #InfraNodus. You can also do mention of Nodus Labs. I will happily retweet it. Because it would be great to get more users to also propose their use cases, because it would make the tool more useful and interesting for all of us. Sam, thanks a lot for your feedback. Yeah, there will be a link to the webinar later, so I'm going to post it on our YouTube channel, and I'm going to post a link to this YouTube channel right now, so you can quickly get the so you can actually subscribe and be informed when it comes. It's here, it's on the front page of InfraNodus, YouTube, and I'm going to post it in the chat right now. So you can subscribe, and it's going to be there. Also, the previous webinar is there as well. Okay, I'm going to answer more questions. By the way, for those of you, yeah, I wanted to go on the local version actually. So for those of you who need to leave, I'm going to leave you the email here if you need to contact me. More questions? In layering of InfraNodus data analysis with large-scale system change is of interest. I can share PSU data, and how is it informed a sustainability plan in which president is presenting to a university system in 2 weeks? Yeah, that would be great, Mary. Please let me know, write me an email, and I can also see if I can be helpful in any way. Is it possible to do sentiment analysis of posts from a series of Twitter accounts? Can it be done with other networks like Instagram? Is asking Andrea. Andrea, yes, actually what you want to do is possible. All you need to do is just to use this advanced import feature, and you just need to save everything into one graph. So for example, let's say I want to save the tweets that are done by Nodus Labs, our account, most popular tweets. Let's say it's going to be data science graph. Okay. And then what I'm going to do next, once this is imported, I'm just going to come back to the same page, and I'm going to use exactly the same name of the graph and import more like a different account. So for example, an account of Quid or graph comments, you know, and then I can just add it and it's going to be added into the same graph. So what you're going to have is actually visualization of all these tweets in the same graph. Okay, export live data through media output function. Yeah, actually it is. So you mean that when the live data appear, it goes into MIDI? Yeah, actually it will go automatically into MIDI. So each time something new will appear, it's going to go into the MIDI interface if it's activated in settings. So you go to settings and you choose MIDI here. You set up your channels on the channel map, which device you want to use. You probably might want to use also console for that, like the JavaScript console, because it would show you which devices are connected. But for those who don't know, MIDI is an interface to make music, and InfraNodus can actually be used to make music. So you are creating text networks, but you can also make music with it or send the signal to actually create anything, visuals and so on. So there are some use cases like that as well. You could also even input your music data or notes into InfraNodus and then visualize them as a graph. So you see what kind of patterns you make musically. Okay, I will see if there is more question. Odilio asked if there is a recording. Yes, if you go to the chat, you will see the link to the YouTube channel and it's going to appear there in a couple of days. Okay, as I mentioned before, polling is an option available where you can vote. And you can vote for the feature you would like to develop more in the sense of what are the common data sources you use to analyze sentiment. So if you can go into poll on Zoom now, it will be activated. And it's just asking you what is the most common data sources you use to analyze sentiment and discourse around a certain subject. It's actually great because I can see this poll live. I don't know if I can show it to you. Maybe you can see it as it's happening. It's anonymous, but it's great to see how Google search results, Twitter is winning at the moment. And Excel and CSV files. Maybe I'm going to show you also while you're still here, and then we will finish there. The same thing for Google search. So you have this app here, Google search results. And why I think it's interesting is because when we talk about this graph comparison feature, so for example, what Google shows is the discourse that already exists out there on a certain topic here, in the sense of if we do the search for coronavirus, we see that these are the main topics that already exist, and we could compare it to the discourse on Twitter. So we could use this option here and make this kind of comparison, which would show us what people are talking about on Google, but not on Twitter. So for example, no one on Twitter is talking about the causes, and people are not using respiratory illness. So for example, that means that maybe it's a more technical term, and maybe people on Twitter are not discussing it in these technical terms. But this can give you quite interesting insights about what discourse exists out there, what people are talking about, and then you can also compare it to the news and see what comes up. So you see also cause of disease is something that is talked about on Google. So when you search for coronavirus on Google, you can see that, that the search results mention the causes for the disease, but people don't talk about it so much on Twitter. So this can be a really interesting way to compare different discourses together. If you want to do it the other way around, you can actually, from here, just click on that button and then make the comparison the opposite way. So here it shows us what people are talking about on Twitter, highlighted in blue, which you don't find on Google. And as we see, Trump, ventilator, positive test is what people are talking about, but it doesn't exist yet on Google. So for instance, if you wanted to create content, like a blog post that could be interesting for people who search for information about coronavirus, this could indicate interesting topics if we exclude these two. For example, positive test, doctor. So for example, information on tests and on tests among healthcare workers could be interesting because people are talking about it, but it's not so much present on Google. Also ventilator, doctor, let's see, saving ventilators, patients. So something about this trade-off that doctors have to do where they save ventilators for the patients who have higher chances to survive. You see, so basically you have a good representation of what people are talking about, but that doesn't exist yet on Google, and that can be interesting to explore. Okay, Stella is saying something about synonyms. And I think that's it. I showed you everything I wanted to show. Thank you for taking part in this webinar and for taking part in the poll as well, and for letting me know what you're working on. I'm going to do a webinar every week. So if you would like to be informed, please follow on Twitter. I'm sending the nickname there. Also use this hashtag InfraNodus, or just send me an email and I will add you to the mailing list. And I think it's going to be also around Thursday, Friday next week. I wanted to do one that would be accessible to the people who are in New Zealand or Australia, so I might change the time a little bit, but we will see. But thank you all for joining, for being there, and for your positive feedback, for your questions. It's super interesting always to know what you're working on, so please don't hesitate to send me a letter. And Alvaro is saying, no, just Twitter, please. So meaning don't send me any more emails, I guess. Okay, I'll try to exclude you from the mail out. So we will communicate only through Twitter. And yes, thank you so much for being here. Let me know if you have any questions you would like to explore in the next webinar. Maybe you want to focus on a particular aspect. And as I said, I'm going to roll out these new features, which I demonstrated today, in the next couple of days. So you will be able to try it over the weekend. And yes, thank you very much. We're going to stop here. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.